She said, "You already asked me that, but I never spoke to her." The first time it happened was on a Tuesday in October. I was standing in line at Meridian Coffee, the small shop 2 blocks from my apartment that I'd been frequenting since moving to the city 3 months earlier. The line moved with the usual morning sluggishness. Professionals in various states of sleep deprivation, waiting for their daily salvation. When I reached the counter, the barista, a woman in her mid-20s with a geometric tattoo crawling up her right forearm and hair dyed a fading purple, looked up at me with recognition. "Medium Americano with an extra shot, right?" she asked, already reaching for a cup. I hadn't ordered yet, but it was indeed what I'd planned to get. I assumed she'd simply remembered my regular order from previous visits. "Yeah, thanks," I said, mildly impressed by her customer service. She nodded and wrote on the cup. "And did you want the oat milk like you asked about earlier? Or are you sticking with regular?" I frowned slightly. "Earlier?" "When you came in this morning," she clarified, her hands continuing to work efficiently. "Around 7? You asked about our non-dairy options, but said you'd decide when you came back." A chill ran along my spine. "I wasn't here at 7, I just woke up an hour ago." The barista paused, marker hovering over the cup. Her expression shifted from casual friendliness to slight confusion. "Sorry, must be mixing you up with someone else." She shrugged it off with a quick smile. "Regular milk then?" "No milk at all," I said, suddenly uncomfortable. "Just black." As I paid and moved to the waiting area, I glanced around the coffee shop, half expecting to see someone who looked like me, someone the barista might have confused me with. The shop was crowded with the usual morning crowd, but no doppelgangers caught my eye. I dismissed the incident as a simple case of mistaken identity. After all, baristas see hundreds of faces every day. 3 days later, it happened again. I was at the corner market near my office picking up lunch. I'd never been to this particular place before, having just discovered it on a walk during my break. As I approached the register with my sandwich and drink, the cashier, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, looked up and immediately reached beneath the counter. "Got your receipt right here," he said, sliding a crumpled piece of paper across the counter. "Found it after you left. You were right about the charge. We did ring up that kombucha twice. I've got your refund." He placed $4.75 on the counter and looked at me expectantly. "I think there's been a mistake," I said carefully. "This is my first time here." The man frowned, adjusting his glasses to get a better look at me. "You weren't in here about 20 minutes ago arguing about a double charge on your receipt." "No," I replied, the same uneasy feeling from the coffee shop returning. "I've been in meetings all morning. This is my first break." He picked up the receipt, examining it, then glanced at me with narrowed eyes, as if suspecting I was playing some strange joke. "Huh. Could have sworn it was you. Same jacket, same haircut." He shrugged and put the money back in the register. "Sorry about that. Guess I need stronger glasses." I paid for my lunch and left quickly, appetite diminished by the strange encounter. As I walked back to my office, I found myself scanning the faces of passers-by more carefully than usual, wondering if someone out there really did bear such a striking resemblance to me. The third incident was harder to dismiss. I was at home on a Saturday evening, having declined invitations to go out in favor of catching up on sleep after a particularly draining work week. Just after 9 p.m., my doorbell rang. When I opened it, my neighbor from across the hall, a woman named Claire, whom I'd met only once during move-in, stood there with a glass baking dish in her hands. "Here's your dish back," she said, extending it toward me. "Thanks for letting me borrow it. The lasagna was a hit at the dinner party." I stared at the dish, then at her. "I'm sorry, but that's not mine." Claire's expression changed from friendly to confused. "What do you mean?" "You brought it over this morning with those homemade cookies. You said your mom's recipe." She trailed off, studying my face more carefully. "Are you feeling okay? You seem different." My mouth went dry. "Claire, I haven't seen you in weeks. I definitely didn't bring you cookies or a baking dish this morning." She took a half step back, clutching the dish closer to her chest. "Is this some kind of joke? We talked for almost half an hour on my couch. You told me about your new job and asked about that noise you've been hearing through the walls at night. What noise? I asked, genuine confusion mixing with growing alarm. Claire's eyes widened slightly. Okay, you're really freaking me out now. She set the dish down on the floor between us, backing away. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested. She retreated to her apartment, closing the door firmly. I stood there for several long moments staring at the unfamiliar baking dish at my feet. Finally, I picked it up and brought it inside, examining it carefully. It wasn't mine. I owned nothing like it. Yet Claire was absolutely convinced I had given it to her just hours earlier. That night, I found myself unable to sleep, my mind racing through possible explanations. Mistaken identity seemed increasingly implausible. 3 separate people in different locations, all convinced they'd interacted with me at times I knew I'd been elsewhere. The statistical probability seemed vanishingly small. I considered more troubling possibilities. Was I experiencing some form of amnesia or dissociative episodes? Was I somehow meeting these people and then forgetting? I'd read about conditions where people functioned normally, but retained no memory of their actions. The thought sent me down a spiral of late-night internet searches on fugue states and dissociative disorders. Another, more bizarre possibility lurked at the edges of my thoughts. Someone was impersonating me. But why? I wasn't wealthy or influential, just an ordinary person living an ordinary life. What would anyone gain from pretending to be me to order coffee or borrow baking dishes? Morning came with no answers, just exhaustion and lingering unease. I resolved to schedule an appointment with my doctor, just to rule out any medical explanations. Before I could make the call, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered hesitantly. Hi, this is Dr. Keller's office, said a cheerful voice. I'm just calling to confirm your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'd never heard of Dr. Keller. I think you have the wrong number. I don't have an appointment. A pause followed by keyboard clicking. Is this not Alex Mercer? My blood ran cold. It was my name. This is Alex, yes, but I didn't make any appointment. Oh, that's strange, the receptionist said, confusion evident in her voice. You were just here yesterday afternoon. Dr. Keller spoke with you personally about some concerns you were having about memory issues and recommended you come back tomorrow for some tests. You seemed quite worried. I gripped the phone tighter. What time was I supposedly there yesterday? More clicking. You checked in at 4:15 and left around 5:20. At 4:15 yesterday, I'd been in a video conference with my entire team, a meeting recorded and saved to our company server. There was irrefutable evidence of where I'd been. I need the address of your office, I said. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in my car outside a nondescript medical building, gathering my courage. I'd driven there immediately, needing to see this place I'd allegedly visited. The office belonged to Dr. Samuel Keller, a neurologist specializing in memory disorders. When I entered the reception area, the woman at the desk looked up and immediately smiled with recognition. Alex, you're not scheduled until tomorrow, but Dr. Keller might be able to squeeze you in if it's urgent. I approached the desk slowly. Do you recognize me? You're sure I was here yesterday? Her smile faltered slightly. Of course. We spoke for quite a while about your insurance coverage, remember? You were concerned about whether the MRI would be fully covered. Can you tell me what I was wearing? She gave me an odd look but seemed to understand it might be related to my apparent memory issues. A navy blue jacket, gray shirt, jeans. Same as now, actually. My heart sank. I'd worn this exact outfit yesterday, but I'd been nowhere near this office. Is there surveillance footage of the waiting room? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist looked increasingly concerned. I don't think I can share that with you, but Dr. Keller is free in about 20 minutes if you'd like to wait. Yes, I said immediately. I'll wait. I sat in the corner of the waiting room, watching the other patients come and go, fighting the urge to flee. When the receptionist finally called my name, I followed her down a short hallway to an office where a man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed beard stood waiting. Alex? He said warmly, extending his hand. I wasn't expecting you today, but Jennifer mentioned you seemed distressed. Come in. I shook his hand numbly and entered the office. I've never met you before, I said without preamble. Whatever you think happened yesterday, I wasn't here. Dr. Keller's expression remained neutral, professional. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Why don't you sit down and we can talk about what's going on? For the next 15 minutes, I explained the strange series of incidents: the barista, the cashier, my neighbor, and now his office. As I spoke, Dr. Keller took notes, occasionally nodding. What you're describing, he said when I finished, sounds distressing. I can understand why you're concerned. Was I really here yesterday? I asked directly. You personally spoke with me? He hesitated, seemingly weighing his response carefully. Someone presenting as Alex Mercer was in this office yesterday, yes. We discussed your concerns about experiencing gaps in memory and moments of confusion. You mentioned specifically that sometimes people refer to conversations with you that you have no recollection of having. The irony was almost too perfect. And you don't find it strange that I'm now telling you I have no memory of that visit? That it perfectly matches the symptoms I supposedly described? I find it concerning, not strange, he replied evenly. Memory disorders can manifest in complex ways. I don't have a memory disorder, I insisted. I was in a recorded video meeting during the exact time I was supposedly here. There's evidence. Dr. Keller leaned forward slightly. Alex, would you be willing to undergo a few tests? An MRI, some cognitive assessments? It would help us rule out several possibilities. What possibilities are you considering? I asked, suddenly suspicious of his careful phrasing. He removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly with a microfiber cloth. Based on what you've described and what I observed yesterday, or what I observed with someone I believe to be you, I'm considering several options. Dissociative identity disorder is one possibility, though the presentation would be unusual. Certain types of seizures can also cause confabulation and memory gaps. Or, I prompted, sensing he was holding something back. Dr. Keller replaced his glasses. Or we could be dealing with something rare called Capgras-Fregoli syndrome, a condition where a person believes either that familiar people have been replaced by identical imposters, or conversely, that different people are actually the same person in disguise. You think I'm seeing imposters? I asked incredulously. No, he said carefully. In this case, others seem to be experiencing a reverse phenomenon, recognizing you in moments when you know you weren't present. The implication hung in the air between us. Either multiple unrelated people were having identical delusions about me, or I was experiencing a serious psychiatric or neurological condition that made me unable to recognize my own actions. I'll take the tests, I said finally. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments. MRI, EEG, neuropsychological evaluations, all came back essentially normal. No evidence of seizures, no signs of structural brain abnormalities, no indication of dissociative disorders in my psychological profile. The incidents continued. A waiter thanked me for the generous tip I'd left the previous night at a restaurant I'd never visited. My dentist's office called to reschedule a cleaning I'd allegedly canceled that morning. A colleague mentioned how much she'd enjoyed talking to me at a bar over the weekend when I'd been out of town visiting my parents. I began keeping meticulous records of my whereabouts, saving receipts, taking time-stamped photos, asking friends to confirm my presence. I installed a security camera in my apartment that uploaded footage to the cloud, providing irrefutable evidence of where I was at all times. And then came the day that everything changed. I was standing in the cereal aisle at my local grocery store when a woman approached me. Mid-30s, shoulder-length brown hair, glasses with tortoiseshell frames. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place her. Alex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. I tensed immediately. Do I know you? She glanced around nervously. Not exactly, but I know about your situation. My situation? The incidents. People who think they've seen you places you haven't been. She stepped closer. The same thing has been happening to me for months. My skepticism must have shown on my face because she quickly continued. Last week, my boss congratulated me on a presentation I never gave. My neighbor returned a book I never lent him. A bartender started making my usual when I'd never been to that bar before. A chill ran through me. She was describing exactly what I'd been experiencing. How did you find me? I asked. Dr. Keller, she admitted. I saw him too. After my third round of inconclusive tests, he mentioned he had another patient with similar symptoms. I convinced his receptionist to tell me your name. She extended her hand. I'm Rachel, by the way. I shook it numbly. We shouldn't talk here. There's a coffee shop around the corner. 20 minutes later, we sat in a quiet corner of the cafe, voices lowered despite being far from other customers. When did it start for you? I asked. About 6 months ago, Rachel replied. Just small things at first, people misremembering when we'd last spoken, claiming I'd said things I hadn't. Then it escalated to full encounters I had no memory of. Same timeline as me, just starting earlier, I noted. Have you found any explanation? Rachel hesitated, fingers fidgeting with her cup. Nothing medical, but I have a theory. It's unconventional. At this point, I'm open to unconventional. She leaned forward. I think we're experiencing timeline bleeding. I blinked. What? Parallel realities overlapping with ours. Events from those timelines leaving impressions in our world. She must have registered my expression because she added quickly. I know how it sounds. I have a PhD in theoretical physics. I'm not usually given to fringe theories, but the data points keep adding up. What data points? First, the medical tests. Clean for both of us, ruling out most conventional explanations. She counted on her fingers. Second, the consistency of the experiences. People who know us well, encountering what they believe to be us, having completely coherent interactions that we have no memory of. That could still be explained by shared psychosis or... Third, she continued, and most importantly, I've started finding evidence. From her bag, Rachel produced a manila envelope and slid it across the table. Inside were several photographs and printed screenshots. This is from my apartment building's security camera, she explained, pointing to the first image. Taken last Thursday at 3:42 p.m. when I was demonstrably at work on a recorded conference call. The grainy image showed a woman who was unmistakably Rachel entering the building's lobby, keycard in hand. And this, she continued, pointing to another image, is from my Instagram account. A post I never made, from a restaurant I've never visited. The screenshot showed Rachel's profile with a photo of a plate of pasta, captioned, "Finally trying that carbonara everyone's been raving about. Worth it." I've never posted this, she said. I never wrote these words. I've never eaten at this restaurant. But when I checked my phone, there it was in my feed, posted 3 days ago with comments from my friends. My mouth went dry as I examined the evidence. How is this possible? I think somewhere, in a reality very similar to ours, another Rachel and another Alex are living lives nearly identical to our own, making only slightly different choices. For some reason, the boundaries between these realities have become permeable. But why just us? Why not everyone? Rachel pushed her glasses up. Maybe it is happening to others who haven't connected the dots yet. Or maybe we're particularly susceptible, quantum resonance or something similar. The real question is why now and whether it's getting worse. Worse how? Her expression darkened. What happens when the other you starts making decisions that impact your life more significantly? When they're not just ordering coffee or borrowing dishes, but interacting with your boss, your family, your romantic partners? I hadn't considered this angle, and it sent a new wave of anxiety through me. Have you experienced that? Last week, my mother called to continue a conversation about my father's health that I never started. Apparently, I told her I thought he should get a second opinion on his heart condition, something I've thought but never said aloud to anyone. Rachel paused. Whoever this other me is, they're making choices I might make. They know things about me that are deeply personal. Like they're not just similar to us, I said slowly, but actually are us. Just elsewhere. Rachel nodded. Exactly. And I think the boundaries are thinning. We spent the next hour exchanging contact information and agreeing to document any new incidents, looking for patterns or escalations. Before parting, Rachel hesitated, then asked, "Have you noticed any other anomalies besides the mistaken encounters?" "What kind of anomalies?" "Changes in your environment, things not being where you left them, subtle differences in familiar places." I thought about it. "Nothing significant. Why?" "Just a theory I'm developing," she said vaguely. "Let me know if you notice anything." That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with Rachel's theories. The idea of parallel realities wasn't entirely new to me. I'd read enough science fiction to be familiar with the concept, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. If Rachel was right, what did it mean for us? Were the boundaries between realities going to continue deteriorating? I finally drifted off sometime after 2 a.m., only to be awakened at dawn by my phone. Rachel's number. "Alex," she said when I answered, her voice tight with urgency. "Turn on your TV. Any news channel?" Half asleep, I fumbled for the remote and switched on the television, navigating to a 24-hour news station. "Tragic accident occurred just after midnight," the reporter was saying, standing in front of what appeared to be the aftermath of a car crash, emergency lights flashing in the background. The victim, identified as 34-year-old Rachel Chen, was pronounced dead at the scene. Police say the vehicle veered unexpectedly off the road and struck a concrete barrier. Investigators are still determining whether mechanical failure or driver error was the cause. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. On screen was a photograph of Rachel, the same woman I'd spoken to just hours earlier. "Rachel," I whispered into the phone. "That's me," she confirmed, her voice shaking. "I'm watching myself being reported dead on live television." "But you're alive, you're on the phone right now." "In this reality, yes," she said. "But what if in another, the one that's been bleeding into ours, I just died? What if that's why we're connected, Alex? What if these boundary violations happen around moments of interdimensional trauma?" My mind raced to process the implications. "You think your death in another reality is causing some kind of ripple effect? It would explain why these incidents started for me before they did for you. Maybe in another timeline, I died 6 months ago creating the first breach. And maybe in yet another reality, something happened to you more recently." A cold realization washed over me. "Rachel, if your theory is correct, and you just died in a neighboring reality, the incidents might escalate dramatically," she finished my thought. "We need to meet, not in public. Do you have somewhere secure we can talk?" I gave her my address, and 40 minutes later she was at my door, looking pale and disheveled, a laptop clutched under her arm. "I've been pulling every article I can find about myself," she said without preamble, moving past me into the apartment. "There's something else you need to see." She opened her computer on my kitchen table and navigated to a news website. This is from 3 weeks ago. The headline read, "Local physicist dies in home invasion." Below was Rachel's photograph. "But that didn't happen," I said, confused. "Not in this reality," she replied grimly. "But look at the details, different cause of death, different date, same victim. Me." She pulled up another article, this one from 2 months prior. "Woman found drowned in Lake Superior, identified as Rachel Chen." 3 different deaths, 3 different timelines, she said quietly. "I think I'm dying across the multiverse, Alex, and each death weakens the boundaries between realities a little more." I stared at her, a terrible suspicion forming. "Show me your ID." "What?" "Your driver's license. Show it to me. Now." Looking confused, she pulled out her wallet and handed me her license. The name read Rachel Chen, with an address across town and other details that seemed normal. The photograph was unmistakably her. "Why did you need to see that?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately, instead taking out my phone and searching for Rachel Chen physicist. The results made my blood run cold. "Rachel," I said slowly, turning the phone so she could see the screen. "According to every record I can find, Dr. Rachel Chen died in a car accident 6 months ago. The real Rachel Chen, the physicist who specialized in quantum mechanics at the university, has been dead since April." Her face went completely white. "That's impossible. I'm right here." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "What if you're not from this reality at all? What if you're from one of those parallel timelines, and somehow, as the real Rachel died across multiple realities, you slipped through? What if you're experiencing these incidents not because someone is impersonating you, but because you're the impersonator, the version who doesn't belong?" She shook her head violently. "Number, that's not. I have memories, a life here, my apartment, my job." "Check your phone," I suggested. "Call your workplace." With trembling hands, she dialed. "Put it on speaker." "Department of Physics," answered a receptionist. "Hi, this is Rachel Chen. I need to speak with Dr. Brenner about my schedule this week." A pause. "I'm sorry, who is this again?" "Rachel Chen. I work in the quantum mechanics lab." Another longer pause. "Is this some kind of sick joke? Dr. Chen passed away months ago. Please don't call here again." The line went dead. Rachel's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering on the table. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "I was there yesterday. I have badge access. I have colleagues, research." "In your reality," I said gently, "but not this one." She looked up at me, eyes wide with dawning horror. "If I don't belong in this reality, then what happens to me? Do I just disappear when the boundaries restabilize? Cease to exist?" I had no answer for her. "And you," she continued, her scientific mind still working despite her panic. "If I've crossed over completely, and you're experiencing the same phenomena I did before." She didn't need to finish the thought. If her theory was correct, I might be next, experiencing reality bleeding because in some other timeline, I had died or was about to die. "We need to document everything," I said firmly, trying to focus on practical steps rather than existential dread. "Compare timelines, identify differences, look for patterns." Rachel nodded mechanically, but I could see she was struggling to process the implications of her situation. If she truly didn't belong in this reality, what did that mean for her existence? Was she a duplicate, a replacement, a ghost? We spent the next several hours creating a detailed timeline of both our lives, looking for divergence points. Rachel's story matched all major historical events I was familiar with, but small personal details differed. In her reality, she'd had a younger brother who died in childhood. In this one, records showed Rachel Chen had been an only child. In her world, certain technological advances had occurred slightly earlier. Certain political events had resolved differently. As evening approached, Rachel grew increasingly agitated. "None of this explains what's happening to us," she said, pacing my living room. "Even if I've somehow crossed realities, why are people still encountering alternative versions of us? If I'm already here, what version of me is still visiting my neighbor or talking to my mother?" I had been wondering the same thing. Maybe the boundaries aren't just thinning between two realities, but many. Maybe there are multiple versions of each of us crossing over temporarily. Or maybe, Rachel said slowly, stopping her pacing, we're dealing with something else entirely. Something we haven't considered. Like what? Before she could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Alex Mercer?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Speaking." "This is Detective Warren with the city police. I'm calling about Rachel Chen." My eyes shot to Rachel, who was watching me intently. "What about her?" "We've been investigating Dr. Chen's death for several months now. Your number appeared repeatedly in her phone records before her accident. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Detective, I think there's been a mistake. Rachel Chen is standing right in front of you," the detective finished. "No, Mr. Mercer, she isn't." Ice flooded my veins. "How did you—" "We traced this call to your apartment," he continued calmly. "There is no one else there with you, Alex. We have officers outside your building right now who can confirm you're alone." I stared at Rachel, who continued watching me with an intensity that suddenly seemed unnatural. "That's not possible," I said. "I can see her right now." "What you're seeing," the detective said carefully, "is a manifestation of your condition. We've been monitoring you since you visited Dr. Keller. You're experiencing a rare form of dissociative psychosis triggered by the trauma of Rachel's death." "What are you talking about? I didn't even know Rachel until recently." "Alex?" The detective's voice softened slightly. "You and Rachel Chen were engaged. You were in the car with her when it crashed 6 months ago. You survived. She didn't. The guilt has triggered a complex delusional state where you've created an alternate reality in which you never knew her, and she's still alive." The room seemed to tilt around me. "That's not true. That can't be true." Rachel, or whatever she was, stepped closer to me, her expression unreadable. "Officers are coming up to your apartment now," the detective said. "Don't be alarmed. They're there to help. Dr. Keller is with them." A knock at my door made me jump. "Don't answer it," Rachel said, speaking for the first time since the call began. "He's lying to you, Alex. Think about it. All our evidence, the documentation. This is just another reality bleed, another version trying to impose itself." The knocking grew louder. "Alex?" called a voice from the hallway. "It's Dr. Keller. Please open the door." Rachel grabbed my arm. "If you open that door, you're accepting their version of reality. Everything we've discovered will be dismissed as delusion." "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Then we continue our research. We find out why the boundaries between realities are failing. We discover which reality is real and which is bleeding through." Her grip tightened. "We find out who we really are." The pounding on the door intensified. "Alex, we're concerned for your safety," Dr. Keller called. "Please let us in." I looked at Rachel, at her desperate eyes, at the hand clutching my arm that felt completely solid and real. And then at my phone, still connected to the detective who claimed she wasn't there at all. "If you're not real," I whispered to her, "then what are you?" "I'm as real as you are," she insisted. "Just not from here. We're both victims of something we don't understand yet." Another series of knocks, harder this time. "We're going to have to come in, Alex," Dr. Keller warned. "We have a court order authorizing us to take you to the hospital for evaluation." I had seconds to decide which reality to accept. The one where I was sane, but reality itself was unraveling around me? Or the one where my mind had fractured from trauma and grief, creating an elaborate delusion? I looked at Rachel one last time, this woman I supposedly had been engaged to marry, yet had no memory of before our meeting in the grocery store. "I'm sorry," I said and moved toward the door. "Alex, don't," she began. When I turned back, she was gone. Just empty space where she had stood a moment before. The knock came again. I opened the door to find Dr. Keller standing with 2 police officers and a paramedic. "Where did she go?" I asked, looking past them into the empty hallway. The compassion in Dr. Keller's eyes told me everything I needed to know. "There was never anyone there, Alex," he said gently. "It's time to get you some help." As they led me from the apartment, I glanced back at my kitchen table. The timeline documentation we'd spent hours creating was gone. Rachel's laptop was nowhere to be seen. No evidence remained of her visit, or her existence. In the ambulance, Dr. Keller showed me photographs, me with Rachel at various events, smiling, happy, in love, pictures from a life I had no memory of living. He explained the traumatic brain injury I'd sustained in the crash, the distinctive pattern of memory loss, the gradual development of delusions as my mind tried to process grief too overwhelming to accept. It all made perfect sense, a clean, rational explanation for everything I'd experienced. Yet as they administered a mild sedative to help me relax, I couldn't shake a final nagging doubt. If my mind had invented Rachel as a coping mechanism for trauma, why had it created a version of her I didn't recognize? Why not recreate the woman I had supposedly loved? And somewhere in the haze of approaching unconsciousness, I heard her voice one last time. Reality is not determined by consensus, Alex. Keep looking for me. I'm still here, just not where they can see. I closed my eyes, no longer certain which reality would